In the Japanese culture, the crane, a magnificent and treasured bird, is a symbol of hope, of thanks, and of good luck. So when another harvest is finished, we put paper cranes on the land in thanks for nurturing us, for feeding us, and for keeping us together. 1,000 paper cranes of many colors. When I heard that this would be my family's last harvest, I felt I had to tell our story. This is a Canadian story, for we once had a farm in Alberta.
History had told them that this land in here from about 50 miles west of here and 50 miles east and from, I want to say, 60, 70 miles north, south to the border was part of the Great American Desert, and that they shouldn't put any settlers here. Tona and his brothers revolutionized farming at Rainier.
We're living in an age of specialists, and there's where Ohamas taught us, I think, as they did raise grain and things like that, but they specialized in their row crops, and their number one specialty was potatoes.
When the Ohamas came, we grew no potatoes, and now Rainier has been noted for one of the best potato growing areas in the North American continent. As how many times has the Ohamas won the titles?
They just showed up one day here, and we got to know them, and that's, Tona was the first one we got to meet. And then we got to meet the rest of the family, and they just all of a sudden one day they were around here, and we were with them, and that's the way life went on.
Uncle Tona, at 80, is the oldest. He's retired now and happy growing his melons, corn, squash, and pumpkins. Still running the farm are the three younger brothers. Uncle Albert, our family cowboy. Uncle Sonny, the youngest, our gentleman farmer. And my dad, George, our quiet, reflective one. They have been farming together for 50 years now. Hi, Dad. Hi. Originally, our family farm was started by my grandmother and her 9 children. Today, only 3 of her sons and their wives remain.
So what are you doing? I'm cleaning a pumpkin for supper tomorrow.
From the garden?
Yeah.
From this garden?
They're frozen though.
As they go into their final harvest together, I can feel my family's real love for this land and for this way of life.
Last year.
These fields have watched my family grow old. 4 generations of Ohamas. The land here has become part of our lives, part of our spirit. It is a spirit which connects the farmer to his land. It is a spirit which connects each of us to the other. For us, it seems, our world began with my grandmother, Kimmy. Like so many other Japanese girls, she came to Canada as a picture bride in 1906 from Kagoshima, Japan. She married Kenji Ohama in Vancouver, British Columbia, where several children were born. Because of my grandfather's job with the railroad, the family was moved to Alberta. Here in the late 20s, Grandpa died suddenly, leaving my grandmother alone with 9 children to raise.
I know she had a hard life. Raising all the kids, 9 of us, widowed. And from a foreign country, and must have been a real struggle.
Since Uncle Tona was the oldest and spoke English the best, Grandma relied on his help the most. When the Depression hit, it became impossible for my grandmother to make ends meet. These days were hungrier than most. She decided to pack up her family and head for Vancouver, where at least she would have the support of her own cultural community. I can just imagine how wonderful it must have been, and how happy Grandma must have felt. Again, she ran several businesses to support her large family. She owned a strawberry farm in Surrey and ran rooming houses in downtown Vancouver. She had survived. In 1941, the younger ones were in school. Uncle Albert was finishing high school and dreamed of becoming a doctor. George, my father, was a first-year student at the University of British Columbia. Uncle Tona was married and had 1 child. He owned his own fish boat and lived in Steveston.
President of the United States.
Yesterday,
We threw in our line,
December 7th,
which is about 1.25 miles for
1941,
dogfish. And
a date which will
after we
live
threw in the line, I was listening to the radio, and it was a Viking battery radio, and it said Pearl Harbor has been bombed. Pearl Harbor has been bombed. So all boats of Japanese ancestry go back into port.
with confidence in our armed forces.
Christmas was only a few weeks away, and families were beginning to decorate and make holiday plans.
Then they told us to dock our boats, so the whole camp would get together, and with pulleys we'd pull the boats right up on dock.
We were all in the Canadian Officer Training Corps, you know. They asked probably all the Japanese people of Japanese descent to resign. So we resigned.
And about 4 days after, they came back and said, no, that isn't good enough. We want you to take the boats down to Gulf of Georgia and put them all there during the duration. So we did that. We tied them up and we put rubber tires all around so they wouldn't get battered too bad.
And then about another week come by and they said, no, we don't want the boats there. We want them upriver in the lagoon. So then we said, you don't know what you want, so we're not going to do it. So they got the Navy to tow all these boats up to this lagoon. And I knew that seeing it was wartime, that there was no way that we could fish again for a while. The thing I thought about was to get myself a truck and sell whatever I could, my furniture, and except my equity in my boat, which they wouldn't give me anything for. So with around $1,300 in the truck, I come across the mountains in February with my wife and my daughter Shoko.
That's where we started out for Alberta with all our belongings in an old truck. And the one thing I couldn't understand was they said the water was so hard, and I didn't know what they meant by hard water. To me, water was soft. Well, it took about a week. Was it a week? A week to get across over the Rocky Mountains and came to Calgary. And we were in Calgary for about a month.
And I happened to run into Johnny Bennett, who was working at the ammonia plant. And he had this farm at, which was the Bennett farm. And he wanted to rent it to me. So we agreed to that. But so I went along, and then in the Albertan it said nobody was to rent, lease, or sell land to people of Japanese descent. So then I went up to see the Premier Aberhart. I had Mr. Clary, who was a very good friend of Mother's. We both went on the train, and Premier Aberhart was very good. He let us talk for about an hour, and he says, the law is the law. We can't change that. But he says there's 101 ways of getting around it. All you got to do is you trust him and he trusts you, and there should be no problem.
So one day we started out for his farm, and it took, but today it would take 2.5 hours from Calgary to the farm here at Rainier. Well, I think it took about 10 hours, and I thought, well, gee, aren't we there yet? Aren't we there? And to me, it felt like we had gone all the way down to Mexico. It took so long.
I don't think some of the neighbors were too happy to see Tona come in. And that was just before the Japanese were kicked out of BC.
You know, at the start, they didn't know us. They didn't know who we were, what kind of people we were. All they thought was we were probably enemies, you know. But
2 days after Uncle Tona and Auntie Grace left for Alberta, Grandma and her children attempted to follow them.
We look forward to a world founded.
They were stopped by the RCMP in Hope, British Columbia, and returned to Vancouver.
Is freedom of speech.
Their car was immediately confiscated.
Everywhere in the world.
On that day, February the 24th, 1942, the Canadian government passed Order in Council, PC 1486, authorizing the removal of all persons of Japanese racial origin from the West Coast, and their movement restricted. Confined to Vancouver, the Ohamas awaited their official orders of evacuation.
Is freedom from fear anywhere in the world.
When I first heard the news, I thought it'd be impossible because we're Canadian citizens. Why? They couldn't do that. And apparently they did.
I was about 17 then. It was just a big lark, really. Something, just an adventure, I guess. Exciting. Who was going to leave home?
We were herded onto a train in Vancouver, and we could only pack the belongings that we could carry with us. And so everything else we just left behind on the strawberry farm that we owned in Surrey.
There were basically 3 choices for evacuees. Males over 16 could go to road camps. Women, children, and the elderly could go to isolated ghost towns in the interior. Or families could stay intact and work together as laborers on prairie sugar beet farms.
When I heard that there were had to go to sugar beets, I felt very badly about that, and I tried everything that I could think of, and it was Judge Clary that actually got them to release them to come to the farm.
We got off in Calgary, and we were picked up by my brother Tona, who had met Johnny Bennett and got to rent his land from him, so he was able to get us to the farm that way.
We come across the prairie down this way in an old truck, on the back of an old truck, and I mean an old 1-ton truck, piled with bedding and stuff like that.
I thought, what a God-forsaken country. It was just really bald-headed prairie when we first come out here. It wasn't a paved highway, it was all gravel roads and windy roads. After living in Vancouver, in the big city, it's kind of a shock.
I remember it was kind of a dirty, windy, cold day. And I could hear quite a little noise in the house. And a boy, the lady found out was Albert, came to the door, and I said that there was a fellow had a sick cow down the road, and he understood there's a veterinarian here. No, there's no veterinarian here. Then the mother came out, and she spoke in Japanese to Albert, and he answered her, and she asked me who I wanted, and I told her. She said, come in. I went in, and there was a whole bunch of people there. There was 2 or 3 men sitting on the floor. And what do you want? And I told him. I was kind of embarrassed. And then she barked something in Japanese to that fellow over there. And he slowly got up, grumbling at her and grumbling at her. And I said, well, you don't have to go. He said, I gotta go. She said so. Well, that was my first impression of the Ohama family, that the mother was a boss.
And the first function that I ever saw them was the 1st of July celebration, and the Ohamas were all there. And they were shy, and I guess we were shy, but they were also different. And the surprising thing to me was the reason they were different because they were city people, and they were very well dressed, and we were not. And we just weren't used to looking at people that were dressed as well as what the Ohamas were at that time. Another thing that we noticed was that some of the women had little dogs, and we had dogs at home too, but they weren't little dogs. They were dogs that would handle the cattle and so on, but some of the Ohama ladies had some little dogs there. So.
My mother, who was only 11 at the time of evacuation, was not so lucky. Her family was moved from Steveston to southern Manitoba, where they worked as farm laborers for 6 years.
We didn't know how long we were going to be away from our home in Steveston. And Grandpa said 2 months and we should be going back home, but we didn't. I heard it in my classroom that everything just stopped, and we had to leave the school. Yeah, and then I think we only had about a couple of weeks, and then said that we were to leave with only 1 suitcase.
They never returned to their home on the west coast. The house along the Fraser River still stands, empty, after all these years.
And this is how I end up, marrying Dad and still farming for 45 years now. I'm still working.
I think my generation thought more of the culture, Japanese culture, than your generation. But when you're spread out, when your nearest Japanese may be 100 miles away, it's different. I think it was the best thing that ever happened. Morally, it was the wrong thing to do, but it's the best thing that ever happened to all of us, I think. All the Japanese. Wow, we spread out more. We're not congregated into certain Japanese villages, or we're really spread out and assimilated more.
Rainier is a part of the Eastern Irrigation District, where farmers have access to water. The average rainfall in this area is 7 inches, including snow.
When we first started, back in the 40s, we irrigated potatoes by flood irrigating. Then after that, we got the sprinklers that we had to move by hand. Then after that, we got these wheels that we moved. That's a trouble with farming today. We're spending so much on machinery.
We grew everything from peas, carrots, beets, and all the different vegetables, and cucumbers and corn, and anything at all to try and eke out a living. And for 2 years, we didn't even make enough to buy our groceries.
Milking range cows for milk. If you can believe that. We had to tie their legs up every time we milked. They kicked the hell out of it. Just so we could have milk for the table, fresh milk.
What did I do? Just like I'm doing now, plus cooking for the whole gang. Every day, 3 meals a day. It was hard, but I thought I had to do it. You know, like everybody did their shares. I thought I had to do it too, just to make the whole family happy. I did it. Yeah.
I had to learn how to bake bread. We never baked bread in BC. Everybody bought bread. I didn't know anything about baking or canning or anything like that because we never did anything like that. Well, when Shoko started school, they didn't know whether they should allow her to come to school or not because, because she was a Japanese Canadian, and they had meetings and they talked it over and like that. But finally, they said she could come to school.
We finally grew a bunch of nice vegetables, and I was quite happy about it. And we loaded what vegetables we had and went to Calgary with nearly a truckload. And no matter where I went, there was no place that would buy my stuff, no matter how good it was. They wouldn't even look at it. All the wholesalers and buyers had a letter that I didn't know about till I talked to Mr. Gillingham, and he said, I'll level with you, I'll show you what I've got. So this letter was from the government from Ottawa, and it said that no one was to help buy produce from people of the Japanese race, and that is why I couldn't sell my thing. So the way we sold it was we went to all the farmers, but they were very hard up too, and in 2 days, Grace and I, we sold these vegetables around the farm, and we got $80 finally.
As always, the main force behind the whole family was Grandma Ohama. Already she was becoming grandma to people in the community.
My wife could tell you more about your grandmother than I can, but I remember that she gave us this, gave my wife this, she'd give it to me, give it to my wife, as just a token of her friendship.
Without a doubt, it was hard. And I was hard on everybody. I was hard on the boys, my mother, my wife, my sister, everybody. I made everybody chip in and no pay.
In the spring of 1949, the wartime restrictions on all Japanese Canadians were lifted. Their rights as citizens were restored, and the label Enemy Alien was removed. The Ohama family was well into their 7th year of farming. Potatoes had become their bread and butter.
Okay, in the early days when we first started, we grew maybe 20, 30 acres. We had a one-row digger, and it would just dig and throw it on the ground. And then the people would come around with sacks and pick it up in sacks. And it was mostly all hand labor, very hard work.
Potato combines, they started to come in, I'd say, in about 50s. In fact, Tona was the first to have one of these Dolman combine in Canada. He's a real pioneer, actually, in potato business.
We got that kind of a notion. He sure likes to play, doesn't he?
So from then on, it went on pretty good, and I would try the Toronto Royal to see if I could win first prize. And I believe it was, it must have been 1949 that I had won the first prize, which was pretty good. But there's a first prize for all the different varieties. What you got to do is really win the championship. And it was my dream to win the championship.
On November 15th, 1965, one day before her 80th birthday, Grandma Ohama died. My younger sister Sue was only 10.
Growing up on this farm, probably the most traumatic thing that happened on the farm was when my grandmother Ohama died. She was
who we all called Big House Grandma because of the big house that she lived on the central farm. And I remember when she died, everyone from her sons and daughters to all of us kids, no matter how old we were, we all felt the loss of someone so important on this farm.
Everybody gathered there, and it was Mom's house, and so it was something like the focal point.
One thing about Grandma Ohama, she really entertained, especially New Year's, Japanese custom. She used to have, must be about 200 guests.
The attachment, the freedom, the pains, and the joys. It's like the wind, the sun, the frost, and the warm rain on your face. The land was now a part of all of us, and our family farm continued.
Well, in 1965, I took the International Potato Championship for both table and seed potatoes. I duplicated that in 67 again.
My mom, Chizuko, repeated the win at the 1980 Toronto Royal Winter Fair.
Mr. Buchanan, who was the buyer for Safeway, he was so proud of the potatoes, he would tell everybody, and he'd tell Oakland, California, what kind of potatoes we grew. And Oakland said, well, if they're that good, you ship us down a carload. And I did. Anyhow, when they got it, they ordered 8 cars a week, which is no way the whole province can supply that.
Well, at the present time, we're getting 2 cents a pound for our potatoes. And the break-even would be approximately 4 cents a pound. And they're probably selling in the stores for 20, 30 cents a pound. Even if the price isn't good, it's still nice to see a good harvest.
Finished. Work's all done this fall.
After 50 years, the dance on the bluff has changed.
あなたがその気で言うのなら思い切ります別れます元の娘の18に返してくれたら別れますさのよいよい
You got two. Okay?
It's different. All our children have left. So really, before, maybe the children kind of held it more together to make you want to stay farming. Pretty, eh?
Yeah. Take them back, huh?
This year, the Ohama farm faced foreclosure. Like thousands of other Canadian farms, many years of high production costs and low returns have taken their toll. Some farmers, getting this news, just walked away and left their crop in the ground to rot, or plowed it all under. My family decided to complete this last ritual of harvest together.
Well, if we're going to be gone Monday, wait.
Right.
Monday's okay. Whatever. Well, then I think that's one of the reasons why people farm, and they stick it out so long, even through the bad years, is the harvest that comes off, and it's a good feeling that you've accomplished.
It'll probably be Monday morning. Okay, fellas, let's go. You're late.
Just the case of economics, it was just the returns weren't big enough.
It's hard to maintain a family farm today because it's not economically viable to keep the young people on the farm.
Of Grandma's 17 grandchildren raised in Rainier, Uncle Tona's daughter, Shoko, is the only one to remain farming. She runs a small family farm with her son, Richard.
The way the economy is today, it is affecting many of the families. And it goes over not just to the men who are making the major decisions in the farm, but it affects the women because the farm, when a woman is in the farming business, they make a total commitment to to the farm as a whole, not just to the business, but the farm is her home, and it is her complete life.
See, everybody's farming a farmer. Yeah, and they want their money first. Like your fertilizer, your gas, all this stuff, and the wages, all this stuff, and they want their money first. And the poor old farmer gets what's left. And sometimes there ain't nothing.
Two young farmers still working on their land are Monfred Haig and my cousin Richard.
I think to be a farmer, you have to have the love of the land, because the lifestyle may disappoint you.
We love growing potatoes. I love farming. I like watching things grow. It's beginning to be offset with the frustration that I get with being a farmer. I think there will have to be some radical changes in the way that the people in Canada view farming. They have to start maybe paying more attention to farming as an industry and farmers making a living. As if we keep the status quo, we won't survive, and I think Canada will become dependent on other countries for food. Right now, the consumers go to buy food, they don't really care where it comes from as long as it's a nickel cheaper or a dollar cheaper.
Well, I guess we have to have some politicians with some backbone to get some definite government policies that say, hey, we're here to protect this industry and we're here to protect our farmers to this degree. We're not here to protect all farmers because not all farmers are deemed to be there.
Well, as long as the banks don't get too upset and I can sell them enough potatoes to make sure they're happy, I survive. I've been doing it for a little while, so maybe I can do it a little while longer.
At the end of every harvest, it has become a tradition for the Rainier families to gather and share a Thanksgiving meal.
Another year grown pressure and fear.
I think that success is measured more in how the people have interrelated with other people, how they've raised their families and treated their neighbors. I think that everything about life in general can be learned on a small piece of land in a backyard garden. I believe that the attachment that farmers get to the land is seeing the creation and seeing the animals grow, and I think understanding his own place in it.
So when you start sharing a lot of things, including the cemetery, you become pretty close friends, and you learn that you all kind of fit a different culture. And it's not a Japanese culture or a Scotch-Irish background that I come from. It's a culture that's developed in this area.
How we wanted to stay, but it's the end of the line. Just until last joy.
We're just users. We're never owners. We will farm it for a number of years and pass it on to somebody else. So we have to be the stewards. We'll never be here forever, and we won't ever own it forever. As a matter of fact, we probably never really own it.
For 50 years, my family have been stewards of the land. Now it's time to pass it on.
Everyone's feelings, even though it's hard to express this right now for all of them. I see their strengths. I see their real true love for working on this land, and even though they'll be gone, they'll always carry that with them. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is the pain of letting go.
Great Plains on northern plains. Great Plains on the northern plains.
next year land. Now it's someone else's turn to make it if they can. River rolls on by, tumbleweeds roll by on the plain. Great Plains on the northern plains. Great Plains on the northern plains. Sing out in joyful chorus when the harvest comes this fall. Bless this day our daily bread if the harvest comes at all. Nothing is forever, just the wind is forever on the plains. Great Plains on the northern plains. Great Plains on the northern plains. Haunted by the memories of old Indian men and songs. 50 million hoofbeats, silenced now and gone. Beneath the endless sky, dreaming river rolls by on the plains. Nothing is forever, just the wind is forever on the plains.